on Swami Vivekananda's thought. How many gushing springs and roaring cataracts, how many icy rivulets and ever-flowing streamlets, issuing from the eternal snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas, combine and flow together to form the gigantic river of the gods, the Ganga, and rush impetuously towards the ocean. So, what a variety of thoughts and ideas, how many currents of forces issuing from innumerable saintly hearts and from the brains of geniuses of various lands have already enveloped India, the land of karma, the arena for the display of higher human activities. A veritable ethnological museum, an ocean of humanity, composed of these race waves, seething, boiling, struggling, constantly changing form, rising to the surface and spreading and swallowing little ones and subsiding. This is the history of India. From the fusion of these different types and races, our modern societies, manners and customs began to be evolved. New ideas sprang up and new sciences began to be cultivated. One class of men went on manufacturing articles of utility and comfort, either by manual or intellectual labor. A second class took upon themselves the charge of protecting them, and all proceeded to exchange these things. And it so happened that a band of fellows who were very clever undertook to take these things from one place to another, and on the plea of remuneration for this, appropriated the major portion of their profit as their due. One tilled the ground, a second guarded the produce from being robbed, a third took it to another place, and a fourth bought it. The cultivator got almost nothing. He who guarded the produce took away as much of it as he could by force. The merchant who brought it to the market took the lion's share, and the buyer had to pay out of all proportion for the things and smarted under the burden. The protector came to be known as the king. He who took the commodities from one place to another was the merchant. These two did not produce anything, but still snatched away the best part of things and made themselves fat by virtually reaping most of the fruits of the cultivator's toil and labor. The poor fellow who produced all these things had often to go without his meals and cry to God for help. Now, with the march of events, all these matters grew more and more involved. Knots upon knots multiplied, and out of this tangled network has evolved our modern complex society. But the marks of the bygone character persist and do not die out completely. But in the land of Bharata, every social rule is for the protection of the weak. We are socialistic. For the sake of one man's or one woman's exquisite pleasure, we do not want to load misery on hundreds of others. The solution is not by bringing down the higher, but by raising the lower up to the level of the higher. And this is a line of work that is found in all our books, in spite of what you may hear from some people whose knowledge of their own scriptures and whose capacity to understand the mighty plans of the ancients are nearly zero. The modern inhabitants of the land of Bharata are not the glory of the ancient Aryans, but as fire remains intact under cover of ashes, so the ancestral fire still remains latent in these modern Indians. And all healthy social changes are the manifestations of the spiritual forces working within, and if these are strong and well adjusted, society will arrange itself accordingly. Every improvement in India, therefore, requires, first of all, an upheaval of religion. Before flooding India with socialistic or political ideas, first deluge the land with spiritual ideas. I am a socialist not because I think it is a perfect system, but half a loaf is better than no bread. The other systems have been tried and found wanting. Let this one be tried, if nothing else, for the novelty of the thing. A redistribution of pain and pleasure is better than always the same person having pains and pleasures. Let every dog have his day in this miserable world. Now, everything goes to show that socialism, or some form of rule by the people, call it what you will, is coming in the boards. The people will certainly want the satisfaction of their material needs. Less work, no oppression, no war, more food. But what guarantee have we that this or any civilization will last unless it is based on religion, on the goodness of man? Depend on it. Religion goes to the root of the matter. If it is right, all is right. Therefore, our solution of the caste question is not degrading those who are already high up, is not running amok through food and drink, is not jumping out of our own limits in order to have more enjoyment, but it comes by every one of us fulfilling the dictates of our Vedantic religion, by our attaining spirituality, and by our becoming the ideal Brahmana. There is a law laid down on each one of you in this land by our ancestors, whether you are Aryans or non-Aryans, Rishis or Brahmanas, or the lowest outcasts. The command is the same to you all, that you must make progress without stopping, and that from the highest man to the lowest pariah, everyone in this country has to try and become the ideal Brahmana. Such is our ideal of caste, as meant for raising all humanity slowly and gently towards the realization of the great ideal of the spiritual man, who is non-resisting, calm, steady, worshipful, pure, and meditative. In that ideal, there is God. I do not mean this man's or that man's conception of religion as the basis of society. Do not understand it in the light thrown upon it by interested and ignorant fools, but understand it in the light of the true and original Vedantic conception. If the Brahmana is he who has killed all selfishness and who lives and works to acquire and propagate wisdom and the power of love, if a country is altogether inhabited by such Brahmanas, by men and women who are spiritual and moral and good, is it strange to think of that country as being above and beyond all law? What police, what military are necessary to govern them? They are good and noble, and they are the men of God, and these are our ideal Brahmanas. Caste system is opposed to the religion of the Vedanta. The conviction is daily gaining on my mind that the idea of the caste is the greatest dividing factor and the root of Maya. All caste, either in the principle of birth or of merit, is bondage. All the social upheavalists, at least the leaders of them, are trying to find that all their communistic or equalizing theories must have a spiritual basis, and that spiritual basis is in the Vedanta only. I have been told by several leaders who used to attend my lectures that they required the Vedanta as the basis of the new order of things. Wherever there is evil and wherever there is ignorance and want of knowledge, I have found out by experience that all evil comes, as our scriptures say, relying upon differences, and that all good comes from faith in equality, in the underlying sameness and oneness of things. This is the great Vedantic ideal. Our experience is that if ever the followers of any religion approached to this equality in an appreciable degree in the plane of practical workaday life, it may be quite unconscious generally of the deeper meaning and the underlying principle of such conduct. It is those of Islam and Islam alone. Thus, I see in my mind's eye the future perfect India rising out of this chaos and strife, glorious and invincible, with Vedanta reign and Islam body. This Vedantic vision of equality and the Islamic approach to the practical social life. Let us be as progressive as any nation that ever existed, and at the same time as faithful to our traditions. Where do you find the Indian society standing still? It is always on the move. Caste is continually changing. Rituals are continually changing. So are forms. It is the substance, the principle that does not change. Do you read the history of India? Who was Ramanuja? Who was Shankara? Who was Nanak? Who was Chaitanya? Who was Kabir? Who was Dadu? Who were all these great preachers, one following the other, a galaxy of stars of the first magnitude? Did not Ramanuja feel for the lower classes? Did he not try all his life to admit even the pariah to his community? Did he not try to admit even Mohammedans to his own fold? Did not Nanak confer with Hindus and Mohammedans and try to bring about a new state of things? They are two great experiments, neither of which is yet complete. In India, we have social communism with the light of Advaita, non-dualism, that is spiritual individualism, playing on and around it. In Europe, you are socially individualists, but your thought is dualistic, which is spiritual communism. Thus, the one consists of socialist institutions hedged in by individualistic thought, while the other is made up of individualist institutions within the hedge of communistic thought. The doctrine, which demands the sacrifice of individual freedom to social supremacy, is called socialism, while that which advocates the cause of the individual is called individualism. The formation of society, the institution of marriage, the love for children, our good works, morality, and ethics are all different forms of renunciation, sacrifice of individual freedom to social supremacy. This surrender of will is the one phenomenon in this world of which all societies and social forms are various modes and stages, and love is the easiest and the smoothest way towards this self-surrender or subjection of the personal will, and hatred the opposite. Thus, only love can be the motive power leading to socialism and not hatred. To become broad, to go out, to amalgamate, to universalize is the end of our aims. As mud cannot be washed away by mud, it is likewise impossible to bring about oneness by means of separative ideas. When, O Lord, shall man be brother to man? The idea of privilege is the bane of human life. The enjoyment of advantage over another is privilege, and throughout ages, the aim of morality has been its destruction. This is the work that tends towards sameness, towards unity, without destroying variety. Whenever privilege is broken down, more and more light and progress come to a race. None can be Vedantists and at the same time admit of privilege for anyone. The same potentiality is in everyone. Why, if one commits murder, should be praised, and if another steals an apple, why should he be hanged? This will have to go. thus trampling on every privilege and everything in us that works for privilege. Let us work for that knowledge which will bring the feeling of sameness towards all mankind. The Vedantist declares that unity is the only thing that exists. Variety is but phenomenal, ephemeral, and apparent. If we do not understand and feel this, any talk of socialistic society becomes meaningless. The difficulty is not that one body of men is naturally more intelligent than another, but whether this body of men, because they have the advantage of intelligence, should take away even physical enjoyment from those who do not possess that advantage. The fight is to destroy that privilege. That some people, through natural aptitude, should be able to accumulate more wealth than others is natural, but that on account of this power to acquire wealth, they should tyrannize and ride roughshod over those who cannot acquire so much wealth is not a part of the law, and the fight has been against that. We have brains but no hands. We have the doctrine of Vedanta, but we have not the power to reduce it into practice. In our books, there is the doctrine of universal equality, but in work we make great distinctions. It was in India that unselfish and disinterested work of the most exalted type was preached, but in practice we are awfully cruel, awfully heartless, unable to think of anything besides our own mass of flesh bodies. Alas, nobody thinks of the poor of the country. They are the backbone of the country, who by their labor are producing food. These people, the sweepers and the laborers, who, if they stop work for one day, will create a panic in the town. But there is none to sympathize with them, none to console them in their misery. Unless they rise, the mother won't awaken. Let us open their eyes. I see clear as daylight that there is the one Brahman in all, in them and me. How many people really weep for the sorrows and sufferings of the millions of poor in India? Are we men? What are we doing for their livelihood, for their improvement? Let new India rise out of the peasant's cottage, grasping the plough, out of the huts of the fishermen, the cobbler and the sweeper. Let her spring from the grocer's shop, from beside the oven of the fritter seller. Let her emerge from the factory, from marts and from markets. Let her emerge from the groves and forests, from hills and mountains. Ye laboring classes of India, well, who cares to think of you? Those whose heart's blood has contributed to all the progress made in the world, well, who cares to praise them? It is you who are actually doing this. Ye ever trampled laboring classes of India, I bow to you.